Hello to all of our friends in Gramophone land. We're so glad you can join us again this evening for another Gramophone Live. We love doing these live events. We love interacting with you, our customers, and of course to the many people who are tuning in who are not really customers of Gramophone or not really all that familiar with us. We're really excited this evening because we do business with a lot of brands here at Gramophone, and they're all very important to us. But it's really special for us to be able to do business with Masimo, which is the parent company that now owns a number of our finest brands, Marantz, Denon, Bowers, and Wilkins. And tonight we're lucky enough to have a special guest. We're actually joined by Kevin Zarow, who is the VP of Operations with the Masimo Audio Group. Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. We were talking a little bit ago, and I was kind of joking that they don't let me out anymore. And there's nothing better than talking to you and talking to customers about all the cool things that we're doing. So I really appreciate having me. Thank you. It's a nice break from the everyday.
Well, we're so glad to give you that nice break. And, to be candid, Kevin, we don't often deal with somebody at your level. We're always glad to have on whomever we get from, one of the brands that we want to feature on Gramophone Live. But it's, I think, great for us and great for you. You're able to actually kind of do a consumer event here and mix with one of your best customers and then the end consumers as well. But it's great for us also. And, just to kind of kick things off, you and I were discussing a little bit about our mutual paths to how we've gotten to where we are in the audio industry. Maybe you can share just a little bit of your background, kind of where you started, how you first got involved with these audio video products that we all enjoy so much, and kind of the career progression that you took so that our customers can get to know a little bit about Kevin before we get started talking about, all the fun stuff.
We only have an hour, so I'm gonna have to make this very, very brief. I think I'm going on 33 years.
Okay.
Which I'm pretty proud of. I mean, 33 years, and I'll say in some way, shape, or form with the same company. But I got my start back in '92 with Philips, and back in the day, Philips was the parent company, Marantz. But long before that, I mean, my father was always into audio, and I used to spend time, with his headphones, listening to some stuff. As a matter of fact, he was in the Navy, and we were living in Hawaii of all places, and I remember as a kid having this set of headphones on, and they were plugged into the receiver at that point in time. And I was so excited, I come running around the corner and literally ripped the receiver right off the shelf. And he like I said, he was pretty good, so he put it all back together. But really started, with Philips back in '92. I had worked at an audio shop before that, and just loved audio, and said I want to turn this into this job into a career. And 33 years later, here we are. But obviously spent time at Philips and made the divisional transfer to Marantz. And I think it was in 2001 or 2002, Marantz was actually bought by an investment firm, Ripplewood, out of New York. They had just bought Denon, and we started buying up other companies. And the list goes on and on. And now, as you said, I mean, we have a whole host of brands that are under the Masimo stable. You said we've got Bowers and Wilkins, we've got Class A, we've got Definitive Technology, Denon, we've got Marantz, we've got Polk, and then we've got the Masimo brand now. So a whole host of brands. It's really, really cool to be a part of it. And I'm sure there's a couple of our sales team that are on this call as well. But we always used to say, again, I think for everybody out there listening, most of you are really enthusiasts in audio video, and so are we who work here. But at the same time, it is our job. And you have a bad month or something, or a bad week, you're like, don't worry, you're not saving lives. But now that we're with Masimo, we actually potentially are saving lives, which is super, super cool. It's really cool to be a part of something even bigger. So.
Well, that sounds great. Let me just mention, too, before we get rolling, that number one, for anybody in the audience, we love taking audience questions. In fact, Randy Taylor, who might just be the Randy Taylor that I know from Atlanta, has just typed in a hello there. I don't know if you've crossed paths with Randy, a guy from our industry.
If it's the same Randy I'm thinking of, I know Randy pretty darn well. So if it's the same Randy, hey, Randy, good to see you. Thanks for joining. No trick questions, Randy.
So to all of our audience, audience members, please feel free to type in questions. We'll take them as they come. And secondly, we are having a giveaway this evening. So if you stay on for a while, you just might win something a little bit later on in the show, and it's an actually wonderful present as well. We just flashed up the sign now talking about how you might be able to win a pair of the PX8 headphones, which is really, that's your flagship on the Bauer side, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, we have multiple headphones on the Bauer side as well as on the Denon side. But yeah, the PX8s are our flagship, and then we go down from there to the PX7s, and we have multiple sets of in-ears, and then on the Denon side we have some super cool headphones as well from the handmade AHD 9200s that are made in our Shirakawa, Japan facility. But what we're giving away tonight are those PX8s. They're pretty awesome.
That is a great headphone. We did a YouTube video, the PX7S2, I believe it is.
S2, yeah, probably the S2.
And that was a fun video to do, and it's gotten a lot of nice reactions since we went live with it. And we actually have our first question. This one's from Brian asking about whether you might be able to update the 7055 and 7025 amplifiers to the new look. And as you and I were talking about not too terribly long ago, just right before the show started, what may or may not happen with new product is always a question mark, because you have plans, roadmaps, and those plans and roadmaps can change pretty rapidly.
Yeah, and I was so for the team out there, Joe and I were talking about this, and I said clearly I'll try to answer every question I possibly can. There's one of the things that we never do is we never talk about products that don't exist yet. But I think if you look at the new lineup, that really all started several years ago with the Model 30 and the SACD30. We went through this transition in terms of cosmetics. I would think that just keep following the website. Stay tuned to your friends at Gramophone, and I think at some point in time in the future, you guys will be thrilled with what you see. That's, I'll say, related to that question, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. But Brian, I really appreciate you asking that. So.
Yeah, we you and I have kind of a list of questions we can work through, Kevin, but I'll just follow up quickly on what Brian comments. My Cinema 50 is lonely. Well, we'll get you taken care of eventually, Brian. I'm quite sure.
Brian, let me just throw this out there. If it's really that lonely, we have an incredible, Amp 10 that would do the job that the replacements for the 8077 to the 7055. And so I know it's a much bigger amplifier than what you need, but that Cinema 50 is great, but go after that AV10 and the Amp 10 and really upgrade that system.
That is an incredible combination, of course, Kevin, and we wind up selling that combination really pretty often now. And a couple more comments have come in. MW225 says, "What's up, Gramophone? I absolutely love Marantz. So happy for this episode. We're glad that you're happy." And so, Brian, go ahead and start that second job, because it'll be worth it. Trust me.
This isn't fair that I can see some of these questions ahead of time. So Brian said that. You guys all saw me starting to laugh. That's a great comment. Thank you.
I'll just share you real quickly, Kevin. In my own journey, I spent the first 6 months out of college working at Gimbel's, a clothing retailer. And not only was I not very happy doing that, but I actually figured out when I added up all the hours I was working as a manager, I was making less than minimum wage. So when I discovered Flanners in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who I believe are still selling your products today,
they sure are.
And walked in there, and they had Bang & Olufsen in the front and Macintosh in the back and Nakamichi and Klipsch and all these wonderful brands, many of whom, of course, are still really rock solid contributors to our industry today. Kind of felt like a kid in a candy store. And after a while, I remember going home one day thinking, who invented this job? People come in and I ask them what kind of music they like. And I've got a whole variety of music. And then we play around with some different equipment that might be in their price range. And then if I'm, fortunate and did a good job, they buy something and somebody pays me for this.
You make it sound like we actually don't work. We really do work. We work a lot of long hours. But I agree with you. I said this before, and I was serious about it. It's audio is a hobby of mine. I remember 8th grade mowing lawns all summer long to buy my very first stereo system. I won't mention the brands, but I will say that my father, I wanted to go to a big box retailer. My father was like, no, we're going to go to an AV specialist. We went to an AV specialist and we bought I got a receiver, a pair of bookshelf speakers, and a turntable. Then I'm like, gosh, I love this. I'm going to turn this hobby into a career. And, you know, I mean, 33 years later, that's worked out pretty well. So and then the cool thing though, Joe, we were talking about this. I mean, you talked about living in Chicago, working for Flanners. One of the things that I've been just being on this call with you, I mean, I didn't realize that our paths have crossed so many times in the past where, you know, you were at Bang & Olufsen at the same time I was at Marantz, but we just like missed each other, and just super, super cool. So,
Yeah. Yes, it is awesome to, one of the nice things about being in this industry is just connecting with people who, you know, your paths cross and, you know, 20, 30 years later, you start working together. It's crazy,
yeah.
and it's a lot of fun. Maybe we'll get to the first question that, you know, now that we've heard a little bit about you and how you got your start in audio and video, maybe you can just tell us a little bit of the story of how you wound up with, initially, I think it was Philips and Marantz, and then how ultimately that turned into the Masimo Group. Is there anything you want to share there?
Well, the Philips thing was kind of fun. My father actually worked at Philips Medical Systems, so same parent company, or under the same parent company, but completely different divisions. And so I was working retail at the time. That would have been 1990, I guess. And I was at Pro Audio in West Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay.
And we went up and visited the Chicago CES show. And I happened to walk into the Philips booth, and there was a dealer there asking a question. I mean, this is like a full-on true story. The dealer was asking a question on this projection television. And believe it or not, nobody in that Philips booth could answer the questions. So I just rolled in. I may or may not have had a cocktail, but I had rolled in and I answered all their questions. And their head trainer's like, "How do you know all this?" I'm like, "Look, because I have this TV at home." And her name was Marcia McMillan. I'll never forget her. And she said, "You send me your resume when you graduate." That was like going to be 6 months later. And she said, "We'll talk." I sent her my resume. I went through a 17-person interview process and got the job, and literally the rest is history. But it was because, I mean, I just, you know, because my dad worked on the medical side of Philips, he got a good discount. And so he bought a Philips TV, and I watched that TV every day. And that's, it's crazy how that actually worked out. So that's how I got the start. But started off at Philips doing a bunch of training, and then got into sales. Again, did the divisional transfer over to Marantz because, again, Marantz was owned by Philips. Started off in the training department at Marantz, then became a sales manager, then became head of product development, and then again we got bought and sold a couple times, and so I just slowly made my way up the ladder. Have had multiple jobs and have learned so much. And what I say that what I'll say now, I truly mean. I mean, yes, this is incredible. You know, you talked about this, the fun that we have to have. But if it wasn't for, you know, you and your team as our dealer, and I'll say equally important, if not more important, is the customers, you know, myself, my team, we wouldn't have a job. I mean, and so it really comes down to, as long as there's enthusiasts out there who continue to love what we do every single day, and there's dealers like yourselves who want to, you know, pitch our wares, then, you know, we all have a lot of time left in doing this. But it does come down to the consumers that we're talking to right now. If it weren't for them, it'd be a very different conversation. So.
Yeah, in the end of the day, we get to sell entertainment products to people who buy them and then really enjoy them. And I loved your comment there, and I just want to echo, the guy who played guitar in Deep Purple for 25 years after Ritchie Blackmore left is one of my guitar heroes, if not my main guitar hero, a guy named Steve Morse. And there's a YouTube video where he talks about how he gets up in the morning and has breakfast, and he reminds himself that the people who buy the albums paid for this breakfast. And I thought, what a cool way to look at it, right?
It's true. The people you get to meet in this industry. I mean, before we were bought, well, I won't go into the whole history, but Masimo, then Sound United, we were the D&M group out of Mahwah, New Jersey. And we had a very famous a guitarist that lived literally down the street from us. And I'll just throw it out there. It was Les Paul. And he used to come to our office, and we just used to have the greatest conversations with him. But all the cool people we get to meet in this industry, because if you're a musician, you're ultimately listening to sound through headphones or speakers or monitors or whatever. But yeah, just like you talked about with the guitarist, I mean, we get to meet all these people, so it's super cool.
And Lester Palfus, his real name, is from where? Do you remember?
Well, I knew him from Mahwah, New Jersey, so I'd be lying to say if I remember where he was really from, but he spent years and years there. So,
if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was from Waukesha, Wisconsin, just
okay,
right near
well,
Flanners.
Okay.
So, and we also, I think, need to talk about the system that you have behind you because it looks like a pretty eclectic system. I'm not able to focus totally on what you've got back there, but can you tell us a little bit about the system that you've assembled?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have the fortunate pleasure of working for the organization, and we get to test all kinds of gear. This system right here that behind me is I'll say the relatively brand new, the Bauer 702 S3s. Those came out last year, or actually the year before. Really enjoyed those. But what you have, the big tube amps, those are called Marantz Project T1s. And I would imagine that most of the listeners probably haven't heard of those. And if you have, good for you. That means you really did your homework. But those came out in 1995. So back in 1995, we were getting ready to release the recreations or the reproductions of the Model 7, Model 8B, and Model 9. So those were legendary Marantz products. Some of you who follow Marantz history know that the Model 9 was actually a part of the Apollo space program, which was super cool. It was such a unique amplifier, and it was so clean that NASA used that on their satellite tracking devices. But back in '96, we were re-releasing these, and they were originals. Two exceptions. The power cords had to change. We had to go to a detachable power cord as opposed to the lamp cord that was basically on that amplifier back in the day. And we had to change the strips on where the speaker wires were connected. But everything else was original all the way down to the potting compound. And we actually found the guy who wound the transformers, and we hired him back. He was working Monday through Friday. It was an incredible project. But to make a really long story short, these amps were designed. Our president back in that time said, if we were to develop a brand new tube amplifier, again, this was 95, what would we do and how would we do it? And so they released these Project T1s, and they're incredible. And I mean, they look fantastic. They sound fantastic. And somebody just mentioned about they really like their Model 40 and their CD60. And on the bottom is actually the SACD30, so the big brother to your CD60. And then you can't see, but around the corner here, I have a Model 30 that I've been testing. Just trying all this different gear together. But the Model 30 and the SACD30 driving those Bauer 700 is second to none. Top piece is the TT15, which is our flagship turntable. And then in the gold piece on top there is the SC11. That was our second in line preamp many years ago. And then my all-time favorite CD player from Marantz in terms of sonics is the SA10, and that's what's in there. My favorite CD player that Marantz ever built was called the CD7. The cosmetics, just the build quality were second to none. But in terms of sonic characteristics, that's the best CD player we've ever made.
SA10, yeah.
SA10. But anyways, Google the Project T1s and have some fun reading those. They're really, really special. And I guess one of the perks about being with Marantz at least the company in general, for 30 years is I get to become like the Marantz historian. So that's how those found their way to me. And I have a whole host I have 4400s, 2270s, a whole bunch of cool Marantz gear that I keep around. And, just so, someone remembers who we are when, I'll be gone before anybody forgets who Marantz is. Going to be around forever. So
2270, I remember it well from the 70s. Let's actually talk, if you don't mind, Kevin, a little bit about, so Masimo actually, of course, is a very well-known and respected brand worldwide, but it was always, I think, in the medical industry.
Medical side, yeah.
And so there probably are folks who don't quite know a little bit of the brand story of each of the brands that you have. Now, I've worked for two of those brands. I worked for Polk Audio back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then I actually moved here to the Baltimore area in 2011 when, I was hired as definitive export sales manager and then also marketing. So I've worked for a couple of the brands, but maybe you can just kind of touch on each of them and share a little bit about the brand story.
Yeah, well, so if you kind of go in, we should probably go in order of oldest to youngest. I don't know if I'm going to get that right, but the oldest brand in the stable is actually Denon, well over 110 years old, out of Japan. Denon, obviously, well, I say obviously, I mean, they got their start many years ago in recording, and I mean that's a world famous brand. I think if you looked at in terms of AVRs, the number one AVR manufacturer in the world. Denon has always been known for, another first in digital. I mean, Denon has always been the company that brings the latest and greatest technology to the market. And it's just been it was really, really interesting when Marantz and Denon kind of came together under one roof, because the brands are very, very different, and they've remained very, very different, not only in terms of, their cosmetics and how they go to market, but really, really very important as well on what's on the inside. Their technologies are very different, where Marantz is, really focused on hyperdynamic amplifier modules and current feedback amplifiers and toroidal power transformers, and Denon has their whole host of technologies. So we've never intermingled that, because those two brands really need to stand apart. The second
Good
oldest,
decision.
yeah, I mean, because there's fans for all these brands, and again, we're never going to homogenize them, and that's the beautiful thing about, we have. It's kind of like, you could almost equate this to Fiat, where they have all the different car companies going after individual customer segments. And so there's technologies that are shared. They both have Dolby Atmos, of course, but when you get into the core of the audio, they're very, very different. Marantz will be the second oldest, going on 70. We just celebrated our 70th anniversary. Marantz is originally out of New York. Some of you guys know that, but and again, that's where I got my start. Bowers and Wilkins, legendary brand out of the UK. When you think of just, again, you guys, most of you probably on this web call know this, but just Google the history of Bowers and John Bowers, and the fact that he was I won't even spoil it for you, but just think of James Bond, and some super cool stuff. Definitive technology and Polk, both born in your backyard, or at least in Gramophone's backyard, and outside Baltimore. And those companies were started by Sandy Gross and Matthew Polk, and the third person's name's escaping me right now.
George Klopfer. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's super cool. And then Class A came out of Canada, and just through the years. That's our Class A. If you kind of look at our stable of brands, and you think about speakers, Bowers, Definitive, Polk, and then you think about Class A, Marantz, and Denon, and they all, they'll intermix and stuff, but they all have their own segments for the market, who they're going after, their build quality, all that kind of stuff. But it really is super cool that that myself, my team, you guys as our dealer, have the ability to sell some or all of these, because they're all very different.
Yeah.
But that gives you guys hopefully a little bit on the audio side. Then the Masimo side, so Masimo is a healthcare company, and they're heavily involved in, during the COVID days, pulse ox was, in the news every day, and in the Masimo's pulse ox sensor is second to none. And I won't even go into, there's probably a million questions that are like, well, why would a medical company buy an audio company? There's a whole host of reasons for that we're super excited about, and I'll just ask that people wait and see. And some of that will come down to, I think we'll talk about this a little bit, Joe, when we talk about streaming music and our HEOS ecosystem. But there's a little bit of, there's probably a lot of tie to that, but that's kind of a future conversation. But we're super excited to be a part of this bigger organization.
Sounds good. MW225 also said, I've got the TT15 turntable, the one that you referenced that's in the background there, and recently upgraded to a 2M black and just took it to another level. Great table. So we're glad you're enjoying your table.
I'll have to check that out. Obviously, I have the cartridge that came with it, which is the ebony, the clear audio ebony. So I'll have to check that out. Thanks for that.
Yeah. You guys have had quite a few new product introductions over the last 6, 7, 8 months or so. Maybe you can just kind of touch on some of the things that you've introduced that are really exciting for the marketplace, for our consumers, for us. Maybe give us a little bit of insight into some of the products that you've been bringing to market.
Yeah, it's been a crazy, I'll say 6 months, 12 months. Well, I won't go all the way back to the beginning of last year, but I think probably midsummer. As a matter of fact, Joe, some of your team members, we took them over to the UK. I took them over to the Bowers and Wilkins facility. We were getting ready to launch the 800 signatures, which is, the way that the Bowers does their releases. They'll release, at least in the 800 series, or even in the 700 series, they'll release the 800s, and then they'll wait. It could be 18 to 24 months and come up with all the improvements that didn't make it into the first series, and that becomes the signature. And so we did that. We released the signatures in the summertime to great fanfare. The California Burl color is just amazing looking. And then that midnight blue is, I mean, it's just, it leaves you speechless. And those speakers were it's so cool to be an enthusiast, but also be a part of the organization and sit down and listen and talk to the engineers and have them tell you all the improvements that they made. And then you get to listen to it. You're like, there's no way that this 801 signature is going to sound that much. And you go, wow, how'd they do that? So cool. It's so cool. So we did the 800 signatures. We launched, well, obviously some more Bowers headphones. We had the S3 versions of the 600 series launch. So it was a very, very busy. We had some CI products on the Bowers side launch, some in-wall subs and some big amplifiers for the integration side of the business. We followed that up with Definitive Technology in October with a whole line of on-wall speakers called Mythos. And they're designed to fit your flat panel TV, and they work both indoors and outdoors. So they're IP rated. You're not going to throw them in your pool, but you can certainly have them hosed down. And they're just super cool. So they'll fit a 65, 75, 85-inch TV, and we have an LCR. Well, we call it the 3C. So it's a left, center, right built into one package. Then we have LCRs that you can flank your TVs with. We launched some new Marantz products back in the fall.
Kevin, do you mind me interrupting just a quick second on the Mythos product? Because Mythos had been introduced fairly recently when I started working for Definitive in 2011. And I don't know at what point that project got killed, but I'm so glad you guys have brought it back because, there are a lot of folks who love good sound and they're not going to be able to buy big speakers. It's just not going to work for their environment for whatever reason. And the Mythos products really have an incredibly slim, clean, really nice look to them. And so I'm just personally jazzed that you guys have brought the Mythos products back and obviously made quite a few upgrades and you're bringing new products, not just reviving the old ones.
Thanks, Joe. So are we. I mean, when Mythos went away, it was really disappointing because it was such a I don't want to call it a unique product, but really designed for for the flat panel TVs. And I guess the good news is they did go away, and we had a chance to hit the reset button and redo these from scratch. Mm-hmm. And the other ones were great. These are so much better in the fact that they're thinner, they sound better, they're easier to install, and the fact that outdoor audio is huge right now.
It's
exploding. So to be able to put these, flanking your outdoor TV or putting them, there's so many places you can put these things, and they're equally at home they're equally do as well in the home as they do outside the home. And so if for the listeners who haven't seen those, go check out the Mythos speakers. There's sizes for your 65, 75, 85, and then you can do an all-in-one, or you can do 3 to flank the TV. It's super cool. So that was a big deal for us. We've got, we also launched the replacements for the PM8006 on the Marantz side. That's the Model 50. And then we launched the replacement for the, I think it was the ND8006. That became the CD50N. The Denon DP3000. I don't know if you've had any chance to play with that, Joe, but for the listeners out there, we have dealers that tell us, I'm not even going to say what they tell us because it's crazy. They tell us how good that turntable is. I'm like, I know it's good, but they throw numbers out there like, this is the best turntable under this price. You guys go test it for yourselves. You'll be blown away. And
we actually were fortunate enough. Peter Medueno, when he was still working with you guys, was able to set us up with Emanuel Milo. And so we did about a 20-minute long.
Oh, you guys do that? Okay.
Yeah, we did a YouTube video with Emanuel where he talked about all the different things that kind of went into the design of the table. I thought it was a fascinating story. And then one of my oldest friends in the business actually bought one and took it to his best friend. So he doesn't live in this part of the country, took it to one of his best friends' home because that guy's got a system that's way more expensive than anything I've ever owned. And they played it up against a turntable that, as you kind of alluded to a moment ago, the reference turntable is, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 times more expensive than your DP3000 Denon table. And he said it was shocking to him how little difference there was between the Denon.
It's fun when you work for a company like I do, and again, my coworkers that are on the call here, and then you guys as our retail partner. When you think about we're big enough where we can get pretty awesome economies to scale to deliver the very best products for the price point. Where we're still small enough where we genuinely care. I mean, truly, genuinely care about you as our partner and every one of the consumers. I mean, it's like it's such a unique position to be in. There's some companies out there that are just too huge. They don't want to bother with this kind of stuff. And so for MW225, there's not a DP3000 back there yet, but I'm going to test it. I mean, I've listened to it at our office, but I've never had it in my own system. So, but I have to try it because I've heard it's just spectacular. So,
oh, you'll love it. It's a tremendous table. We got a question from Paul Doyle. Why won't Marantz put album artwork on their streaming amplifiers? That's an interesting question.
Oh, so that's actually a good question, and I can say stay tuned for the future. But on that right now, I mean, if you think about I assume you're talking about a streaming amplifier like the Model 40N. I mean, it's an OLED display, but it's only characters. There isn't actually an OLED display on there to do album art. But I appreciate that comment, and I used to run product development, so I at least take the note down. But yeah, that's a good call. You're not the first one, Paul, that's asked us about that. So
hey, there you go. But I had interrupted you when we started talking.
Actually, Joe, just for that, I mean, sure. We'll probably get to this, but I mean, it is on your app when you're streaming your content. It's right on your app in front of you. So if you're an older guy like me, I mean, I couldn't even see what's on the front of my screen right now, so I use this. But I do appreciate the comment very much, and people ask us that. So.
Love it. But you were continuing to talk about some of these various new products that you guys have introduced, and I kind of interjected there quickly on the Mythos series from Definitive. But feel free to continue to describe some of those products that you've introduced recently and that have been big hits for us, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, just if you think about, so there was, like I said, there was a whole bunch of stuff we did, mid to late last year. And again, I'm really excited about the 50, we call it the 50 series. That replaced the PM8006, which for the Marantz, which was in the line for years. And then we had the replacement for the ND8006. So those are out. But as we kicked off we call it fiscal 24, but calendar 24, we started off with Denon. So the replacement for the probably 3-year-old AVRX 6700 was replaced by the 6800, and that's come along with great fanfare. I mean, we upgraded that with a brand new HD GUI, redid the audio on the inside, full 8K, but now 8K with I think we have 7 HDMI inputs on there, and then we added to that product, like we have a few others, direct. So you have 4 subwoofer outputs, so you have the ability to do Odyssey auto calibration or direct if you want to pay for that upgrade. And you can, depending on your room, you can absolutely get just the tightest calibration. And again, if you're using multiple subs, then use direct. It's super cool. So that kicked off in January. We fast followed that up with the Marantz Cinema 30. So that kind of completes the line when you think about the Cinema series. So I won't go to all the hi-fi stuff, but the AV10 Amp 10, now we have the 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then we released the new stereo receiver not too long ago. And then I'm sure if you're not going to ask, I'll just go ahead and say this because I get it all the time. How come why is the Cinema 30 the highest one and the Cinema 70 is the lowest one? We actually just reached back into history because back in the day, that's how Marantz used to do it. So the lower the model number, the better. So we went back to history and brought that back. So Cinema 30 is our new flagship receiver. That's 11 channels of amplification and 13 channels, or actually 13.4 channels of processing. And that thing's a beast. And so if you were a fan of the 8012 or the 8015, this takes it to the next level, not only in terms of features, but just characteristics as well. And then I think, what are we at? We're almost in March, and so we're going to kick off with a brand new Class A preamplifier here shortly.
Okay, good. If you don't mind me interjecting just real quickly, we just shot video on the Cinema 30. We haven't posted that YouTube video yet, but I was really impressed by a lot of the things that you've done, one of which is that the processing power is upgraded so much that it really enables you to do a lot of the cool new things, like, for example, integrating the 4 subwoofers independently and some of those other things. So if there's anything in particular you want to share on the Cinema 30, we think that that's an awesome piece of gear.
Yeah, I mean, we're super excited about that. The 8012, I mean, you think about people go back and forth on audio versus, audio products versus AV receivers and things like that. And everyone's like, well, if I'm doing a 2-channel system, I should always buy a 2-channel product. And if I'm doing a theater, I should always buy a theater. I mean, the cool thing about some of these products is that the ability that you can intertwine them. So if you were to take a Cinema 30, for example, or it doesn't matter, Cinema 50, because let's see, who has the Cinema 50? Brian has the Cinema 50. So Brian's got a Cinema 50 and he's like really into home theater, but he wants to take that next step into 2-channel audio. So you look at something like the Model 30 that has a power amp direct input circuit on there, and you pre out of your Cinema 30 left and right, and you go into the Model 30, and all your analog or all your 2-channel sources can plug into the 30, and your theater sources plug into the 50. You're using a pair of Bauer 702s for both theater and audio. You absolutely get the best of both worlds. So, I mean, we have some super cool features like that we do. I love the fact that we have the ability to turn off amplifiers inside the receivers, individually, so that you could use a power amp just for the left and right. The fact that you can do crossovers by channel, as opposed to the old days, we used to do, universal crossovers. So if you set it at 80 hertz, everything was at 80. So there's just a ton of things that we do, and other manufacturers do as well, but that we do to really amp up that experience, whether it's whether it's 2-channel or whether it's home theater or a combination in between. I mean, I just got to say this. I mean, when I was in New York, well, I didn't share that I was in New York, but before I moved here to Michigan, I was in New York for 15 years, and I had a killer theater. And I don't have a theater right now because I don't have a basement. And as much as I love 2-channel, I really, really, really miss theater, and not just because of movies, but because of music and concerts, and having 7.4.6 or 9.4.6 or whatever. And so I'm excited to see what we have here in terms of like the Cinema 30, and to get the take on our end users who are doing that for both 2-channel and for home theater, because it just works so well for both. So
it really does, and being able to mix 2-channel and home theater is such a great idea, as you've said, and especially because of all the things you're building into your receivers now. But anyway, thanks for that. You started talking just a little bit about the new Class A products.
Yeah, so we have a new preamp coming. Class A is our flagship audio brand, and so right now we have a stereo preamp. We have a set of mono blocks. I mean, it's the same amplifier, and a stereo amplifier. So you can put together just an absolutely wicked 2-channel system with that. Again, a pair of Bauer's 800s would be perfect. 801s, 802s, whatever would be. But we'll spend a little bit of time on this. But HEOS is our streaming audio ecosystem, and so every single Marantz product, virtually every Denon product on the AV receiver side, multiple products on the hi-fi side on both Marantz and Denon, and now Class A have the HEOS ecosystem chip built in. It's more than just streaming audio. I won't go into all the things that HEOS does for us, but the ability to have again, let's say a set of Bauer's 800 speakers, or whatever your favorite speaker is, with a pair of these Class A amps and this new preamp, and then literally from your phone, I mean, just have the ability to go in and grab all the content from your phone and stream it wirelessly to your Class A preamp in full high resolution, 192.24. It's fantastic, and I think you think about that product is wicked cool. It sounds amazing. Take a product that I just briefly touched on, the SA-CD30 or the CD50N. Those have the HEOS technology built in as well. And what I love about something like the model, or the SA-CD30N, is if you have tons of silver discs, it's going to play them all back exactly as the artist intended. Yet, if you also want to make your way into streaming, you have the ability to do both of those. So it's the best of both worlds. I know somebody on here had a Model 40N, which is super cool. We kind of talk about just add speakers, or in that case, I think they had the turntable as well, I think. But you could have an incredible audio experience with one component, a set of speakers, a subscription to Tidal or Amazon or Qobuz, or what list goes on and on, Spotify, and you can play content at your fingertips that sounds really, 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 really good. And I still use the silver disc. That's why I have a CD player in there. But at the same time, I do find myself doing a lot of streaming. And when we do a lot of demos, we use streaming because it's gotten so good. All you need to do is have a really good, really robust Wi-Fi network, or better yet, hardwire your equipment with a Cat 7 cable, and you're good to go. So,
Absolutely. So, were you done touching on the Class A products that?
Yeah. Just
okay.
there'll be a lot more about that. I probably wasn't even supposed to mention that yet because it doesn't come out till next month. But sorry.
Well, that's okay. I mean, frankly, I love your passion, and just your remark earlier about a company that's big enough to be able to do things to scale and yet small enough to still be passionate. In a lot of ways, that really is kind of the Holy Grail, because there are some wonderful companies out there that have some great ideas that just aren't doing enough business, frankly, to make that good idea really be cost effective for the consumers. You've at trade shows, I'm sure you've walked into rooms where these speakers are $120,000, and you're listening to them and you're thinking, well, why is it $120,000? And they start explaining to you how they've got some unobtainium in the tweeter or whatever the heck it is. Well, yeah, but this shouldn't be $120,000. I've heard 10,000.
It's interesting, and I'm glad you bring it up. But I always try to. I mean, I try to be really balanced on that, because if you're a guy in your garage or a gal in your garage, it doesn't matter, and you're hand making something, the cost to do that is just, potentially ridiculous. And so, we do get that economy of scale, which is super cool. There's other things we do is that, like, none of you guys as our dealer and none of the customers on this call or across the globe are they're not petri dishes to us. You guys aren't beta testers. We have the ability to go through and do all that stuff in the beginning to make sure that when you get the product, it works right. And then some of these small fringe companies, it is what it is. It's like, okay, you're the beta tester. Let us know if it doesn't work, and then we'll go back and fix it after. So it's again, that's why I said we're big enough to build incredible products at a value price, but we're small enough that we truly do care. And I love that about our organization.
A friend of mine, sadly, in the audio industry, once had a conversation with the president of a reasonably well-known company, and they were talking about how this new product was not quite a baked cake yet, and the president wanted to release it. And my friend said, well, but I don't feel like we've really wrapped up the beta testing and are sure that this thing is rock solid as yet. And the president of the company's response was, well, it's got a warranty, doesn't it? So your phrase about you guys don't treat the consumer as a petri dish who is the beta tester for the product. It does, in fact, say a lot about your products. And I would say, by the way, we do have a very good repair department here at Gramophone, and we don't seem to have a whole lot of issues with products that you guys manufacture where it's just been released, but all of a sudden now we're doing all this repair work on these new products. It just doesn't seem to happen with Denon, Marantz, Bowers, and so forth.
Well, the cool thing too is we can have an idea and say we want to have this feature on our receiver or on our preamp or whatever it is. It's not ready to go yet, but we can tell our consumer, our public, that it's coming because we have this technology inside called HEOS, which is all about not only the ecosystem but all about our updates, our software updates, and how the products get updated. So we can release a product right now and have the customer experience that, love that, have it be bulletproof, and then 6 months later release a new feature that is important to them as well, that we've already gone through and tested. And so that's cool about the stuff that that we can do these days with HEOS and other in the networking technology that we have.
Right. A couple quick questions here. One's from Brown Scott, I think it is. Very good points. I've built amps and speakers. There's definitely a sense of pride, but I've purchased both that cost less and sound better. And then a question about would it make sense to add a power amp like the MM7025 to his 6015 to boost the 2-channel experience with the home theater setup? DefTech 9060s, which is a wonderful speaker, as you know.
So that's a great question. I'd answer that. So I'd answer that with a potential yes, but it really depends on the size of your room. If you remember, and I feel terrible saying MM225, it sounds like THX1138 or something, but MW2215, whatever your real name is, because the BP 9060s have a powered subwoofer. That's where you suck out all your amplifier power is with deep bass notes. So would you see an improvement? I mean, the amplifier section of an MM7225 is better than a 6015. I mean, and it should be when you think about that whole chassis is the amplifier versus the section if you look inside the top of the receiver. So you would probably get some sonic improvements, you know, in the mid-range and in the tweeters. It would play cleaner and louder. But again, if you'd have a chance to test that beforehand, because you have a lot of power in reserve on that amplifier because the Def Techs have subwoofers built in. So, and I shouldn't say Def Tech. You said Def Tech, but definitive technology.
There you go. Right. Okay. Well, good stuff there. Let's see. You talked a little bit about HEOS and why it's so important to the company. Maybe you can just amplify that a little bit. And obviously, you've already kind of teed this conversation up with the conversation we had about streaming. I know a good friend of mine who, you know, decades ago owned one of the most expensive turntables on the market and has changed that out several times, but has always had a really great turntable in his system. I asked him recently how much he uses, I think, both Tidal and Qobuz. I asked him recently what was his percentage of streaming versus records. And he said 100%. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, streaming nowadays is so good. I sold off my turntable and sold off my records.
I don't think, I mean, that's cool for him, and that's a cool story. I can't see myself personally ever selling off a turntable. There's something to be said about, and I don't have one here with me, but because I'm talking to you guys, but sitting down, and by the way, this is not the most ideal setup to be fair. This is, I mean,
Sure.
I do gear in and out of here all the time, and I've been dinking around with this. I pulled these amps not too long ago out of the room behind me.
Okay.
I still love to turn the chair around with a glass of whiskey and actually put a needle down on the turntable and just listen.
Yeah.
There's emotion about that that's very different than, and again, as much as I love streaming because it's super convenient and you can access thousands of different titles, you know, at the tip of your fingertips, it's not nearly as sexy if you can understand that. I mean, to be able to sit there and again drop the needle and just sit back and listen, and it's a different experience. And we can argue all day long about, does a CD sound better than an LP? Does an LP sound better? It doesn't really matter. It's what all that matters is that as long as you guys and gals are listening to music and you're enjoying it and you're sharing it with your kids and your family and friends and everybody, I mean, it's what makes the world go around. I mean, music is one of the most emotional things out there. And I was at an event, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. So I have a local distillery here, and they're doing music weekends every Sunday. And they asked me, I shouldn't say this, but I frequent that distillery now and again, and I've become friendly with them. You like to join us on these Sunday listening sessions. And so the first time I went there, I brought these 700 series speakers with the Model 30 SACD30N. And I had a couple come up and they were listening, and you know, she's like, we just have like a Bluetooth speaker. I'm like, that's fine. You're still listening to music, and they had headphones, but she said, well, put something on that would show me, like, why would I ever want something like this? And I put on Sarah Brightman. And it was a duet with Andrea Bocelli, and it was Time to Say Goodbye. This woman broke down in tears in front of me, and she hadn't even had her first cocktail yet. And she was like, Lord. And then I put on, I can't remember the song right now. It was from the Never Enough from Greatest Showman.
Sure.
And she cried again. And it was awesome. I mean, I'm not making fun of her. It was so emotional for her. And she's like, we have no room for this, but now I know why people do this.
Yeah.
And she did end up buying a pair of Bowers headphones, which was super cool. And they were PX8s in the burgundy color, which was awesome. But and I was streaming at that point in time. But then, you know, a little bit later on, a customer came up and said, no, I want to hear an LP. And we put on, I think it was Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms or something. And, you know, that you can see the guy just super emotional. So I don't know. I'm probably 90-10, but I can't see myself ever getting rid of my turntable. So, nor my CD player.
I'm glad you told that story, because that is the other side of it. There's an experience of physically interacting with that music when you put on an LP that is different from streaming. So I'm glad we got both sides of that story out. But back to HEOS. Is there anything more that you wanted to share with us about HEOS and why it's so important to you guys?
I just think it's and again, and obviously I work for Masimo and Dan and Marantz and Class A, and this is our brand of streaming. But putting that aside, just listening to music, and I think the thing that's so cool about streaming, and then now I'll brag on our company for a second, is we have so many products with this technology built in. So if you want an all-in-one speaker, we have that for you. That can go in your bathroom. If you want a receiver for your den with a pair of Bauer speakers, we have that HEOS technology built in. You want a Cinema 30 or an AVRX 6800, we have that technology built in. You want speakers on your outdoors, you have one of our little amplifiers with that technology built in, and you have the ability to play the same content through the entire house at different volume levels, or different content in all those different rooms at different volume levels. It just allows you to do true whole home audio at the tip of your fingers, and depending on which brands you're supporting. From us, Marantz, Ardenna, and now Class A, and then you can build out a world-class audio system with just all-in-ones, or with individual components on the theater side, on the hi-fi side, and everything in between. And I'm just super proud of the company that they've made the investment in this, so that it doesn't really matter if you're at $1,000 Stereo 70 or a $12,000 new Class A preamplifier, or a $249 Denon all-in-one speaker. You can do it all. So it's just, if you haven't experienced yet, or for those of you, so MW225, you've got a 6015 that has HEOS built in. Obviously, I'm looking at the name here, who had the Model 40N HEOS built in. If you haven't tried that yet, go ahead and download that app. Just make sure your network is robust, because people will talk about, the music stopped. Well, but then I say, that's your network. Well, no, when I hit send on the email went. That's very, very different. When you're streaming 192.24, you are taking up massive bandwidth. So just do yourself a service, get a great network for your home, and just listen to music and just enjoy it.
To me, one of the exciting things about where our industry has gone over the last 20 years or so is that there are so many different ways to enjoy so much good content. You remember, it wasn't all that long ago that streaming meant poor quality, period. There wasn't good quality streaming.
No, it was terrible. And though I will still argue, and I remember I was in Canada years ago, and I was on a music panel, and people were really belly aching over MP3. Yeah. And my point to the audience was, but are your customers listening to music? And they're like, yes. I'm like, well, then we all have hope. Because once they listen to music, then we just need to educate them, and then everybody who's listening in, educate your friends as well. There's a better way to listen to music. It isn't necessarily on a phone with headphones. That's a great way to do it personally, but you can do it as, like I'm doing here, or in the theater aspect. And so just listening to music is the most critical part.
It really is. I had a great conversation with one of the guys in the industry. This is probably 10 years ago now, about he got talking to his customer and sold her a bunch of good gear, because she noticed that when she put her phone in a cup, it would amplify that. It sounded better because she had put it in like a coffee cup. And that was the start of her realizing, it could sound better than what I've been listening. So you're absolutely right. As long as people are listening to music, it's a step in the right direction. I love Jeffrey's comment.
We could have made a fortune on that if we had a coffee cup amplifier that.
Yes, absolutely. I love Jeffrey's comment here about the HEOS upgrade. Is great.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. It was a long time coming, and obviously, it was really interesting, and I'm glad you brought up that point. The original HEOS app was around for, I want to say it was like 8 years with minor upgrades. This was a massive upgrade. And if you were a new customer coming into the ecosystem, you looked at the app and you're like, well, this is what it should look like. But if you were an old guy like me who had been using the same app for 8 years, I'm like, man, this is hard to learn. But now I can't go back to the old app. The new app is just light years beyond what the other one was. So.
Yeah, it's been a great step forward. So we're kind of getting close now to the point, Kevin, where we're going to wrap up the live stream. But let's just see if there's some things that you might want to talk about during our got about 5 minutes or so left, I guess.
What do you mean we can't go for another hour? This is awesome.
I know it's fun, isn't it?
I have to go back to work after this. I told you before, I still have 2 conference calls, one at 7:30 and one at 8:30. So I'd much rather sit here and talk to you. So
Well, we can arrange it to keep going, I'm sure, but it has been a lot of fun. But in the time that we have left, I guess there's maybe one or two things that I want to ask about. The
sure.
way that consumers interact with their audio video receivers and therefore with their systems, has kind of changed. Are there any cool, AVR features that maybe we haven't talked about yet that you would kind of like to highlight? I kind of felt like the Cinema 30, and again, we haven't published the YouTube video yet, but I kind of felt like what we put together to review the Cinema 30 was just kind of an eye opener for me about how many cool things are happening now with higher end technology. So maybe you can highlight a couple of them that you particularly enjoy.
Well, even taking any of the receivers aside or the gear aside, I think what's really cool is, there's some incredible content on TV now. When you think about what happened during COVID and content being released right to the home, there's so many customers out there that listen to that on their soundbar, or not even on a soundbar, just on the TV. So I always like to say the best upgrade, or the first upgrade, is a soundbar. And then the next upgrade you can make is you can put again, I'm looking at a little chart here just in case people had questions, but the Stereo 70, it's a 2-channel Marantz receiver, or the Denon DRA 900 with HDMI inputs and a little pair of bookshelves, whether it's Polk or from Bowers. That's an improvement then. And then going to a 3-channel or a 3.1 or a 5.1. So once you're listening to music, listening to movies, if you're only doing it on your TV, do yourself a favor and add a soundbar. If you're doing it on a soundbar, step up to a receiver and 2 speakers, and we can just keep going and going and going. But I think that there's some just cool features out there, especially setup. Joe, no offense to you, but you and I are older. And when you think about the setup that we used to have 10 years ago, that was like Atari, dot matrix screens. We have a full HD GUI that literally the smart setup guide on the Marantz Denon walks you through it, and it's so easy. And so I think there's a lot of people who are, and again, probably not your customers or the customers are on this call, but there's so many people who are intimidated by it. They turn it around and they see all these different speaker jacks, and they see HDMI, and they see all this. Use the GUI. It will literally walk you through the system and give you an incredible experience right out of the box. And then from there, there's just so many, I won't call them Easter eggs because that's not the right term, but there's just so many little buried features that can make the system better and better and better and better. That, for the most basic user up to the most advanced user. So, and again, we talked a little bit about that preamp outputs and the ability to shut off individual channels if you want to add a power amplifier or crossover networks or all that, or Odyssey auto calibration or direct, whatever. There's just so many cool things to do to improve the sound.
There really are, and you touched on something which maybe is a good concluding point for us in terms of how important audio is. One of the most shocking things to me in just watching the industry evolve over the last couple of decades is how much better video has gotten. If you look at today's modern, 55, 65, 75 and larger displays, it's stunning how good they look. And of course, they're this thick, they're so slim. But the bottom line of all that for the audio side of it is that the speakers that if 25 years ago, Kevin, you thought to yourself, I'm going to go buy the best TV I can get a hold of, you would have essentially gotten a great big box that would have gotten delivered to your living room, right?
Yeah.
And the color would have been quite good, nothing like the colors are today, but that box would have been big enough to have held some pretty good speakers if the manufacturer wanted to put a pretty good speaker in there. And these shockingly beautiful TVs of today, the speakers are absolutely tiny. I think, it's worth reiterating now as we're wrapping up this little seminar that you guys manufacture so many wonderful audio solutions, and modern TVs really need those wonderful audio solutions because, you can't get great sound out of a speaker that's that big. It just doesn't happen, right?
No, not at all. And that's the cool thing about, having the stable of brands we have. You want to talk about best in class soundbars, you've got Polk. Bowers has sound bars. Denon has sound bars. But then you can just keep building up and up and up and up. And I think it's a great point, Joe, that you said. I mean, customers who have flat panel TVs and don't have any audio are absolutely missing out on an incredible experience, whether it's 2-channel, 5.1, 7.2, and beyond.
Yep, and that's where all the emotion is. Well, I think there's a couple of things to say, Kevin. One, of course, is thanks to you for being our guest this evening. It's been so much fun chatting with you. As you've alluded to a couple times during the conversation, thanks to all of you folks out in Gramophone land who have been sitting in on this conversation and hopefully having at least some of the fun that Kevin and I have been having, because it's been great to have you. And now it's time to remind all of you guys that Kevin has very generously offered up to us this pair of PX8 headphones, the top of the line headphone that they make. So we're posting the QR code up here now, and we're also posting the just link if it's easier for you to reach out to us via the link. But we're going to give away that pair of PX8 Bowers headphones. I know from the review we did on the PX7, just a few months ago, how wonderful that product is. The PX8 is even better. So thanks again, Kevin, for donating that to one of our lucky listeners. And so we're absolutely looking forward to doing that as well. Once we give people an opportunity to ring in and let us know that they're interested in winning those.
That's awesome. Well, whoever wins those, enjoy those. They're super cool headphones. So thank you. And Joe, thanks for having me. And like I said, this was a real treat. And thanks to your customers, I guess, out in Gramophone land. That's very cool. So thanks for listening, team. I really enjoyed this. And if you have any other, if you ever need any more information, check out the team at Gramophone or visit any one of our websites. But thank you for your support. If it wasn't for you guys, some of us wouldn't have jobs, and I mean that sincerely. So,
yeah, absolutely. I ate breakfast this morning, and the folks on this call here, Brian just rings in with cool. The folks on this call and others like the folks on this call are the ones who paid for my breakfast this morning. So thanks to all of you guys for sharing this time with us. We want to urge you, if you haven't had the opportunity as yet, to check out Sky by Gramophone, because so many of the cool brands that we represent we're able to sell on Sky. And you'll always get a secure checkout with fast and free shipping straight to your door. So some of the folks out there in Gramophone land can come visit us physically in Timonium and Columbia and Gaithersburg, Maryland, but a lot of our consumers can't. And we've got a way for you to be able to shop with us as well on Sky by Gramophone. And of course, check out gramophone.com for more information on the various new products that Kevin spoke about today and all the other products that we've got from Kevin from your Masimo Group. So thank you again, Kevin, for joining us, and thanks to all of you who have participated in this. Of course, we'll clean up the front and the back end of this video, and it will live on on YouTube. So we appreciate all of you joining us. Thanks again, and enjoy your evening.
Thanks, everybody.